Welcome to 30 Minutes of Faith. We're happy to have with us today Ron Kaldor, who is a personal friend, former member of our board, a fine representative of the Jewish community who's done a lot of good in this community. Ron, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, John.
Glad to have you.
I'm very happy to be here.
Let's start with where you were born and raised.
San Francisco, 1944, in a hospital that's no longer there, so it indicates how long ago that was. Basically raised in San Francisco and then Anne Marin County, and then went on to school at Berkeley and then Hastings Law School.
And do you have brothers and sisters?
I have an older sister who's 3.5 years older than I am, who is a widow living in San Rafael, and she has 2 kids.
And you have children?
I do. We have a 31-year-old daughter living in San Francisco with her husband, both of whom are attorneys, and a son, David, who's 21 in college.
Now, talking about attorneys, how old were you when you decided you wanted to be a lawyer?
You know, it's a great question because I thought about it more or less in high school, but had no idea what that meant. And we had a relative who was an attorney, but I didn't know him very well. And when I went to college, I was basically interested in taking a whole range of different things. And law was on my mind, but it wasn't really foremost on my mind.
You and I have talked about a lot of things in several years gone by. What made you want to be involved in lots of things and to be busy in what was going on in the communities and schools and houses of worship?
Well, I think it's more that I thought I could help. I could do some things and make some changes. I've been involved in politics ever since I was in college. I saw how things could change, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. And as I got involved in government and then in law practice, I realized that there was more to the day-to-day work I did, although I was aimed at helping clients then. So I often got involved in non-profit organizations. I was active in my temple, and I've gone on to do other interesting things. Certainly the Interfaith Council has been one of my most interesting ones.
One of the things I was thinking about the other day when I was giving ponderance to you was, were you raised in an active, when I say active, Jewish home where traditions and things were practiced regularly and routinely?
Yes, we're Reform Jews, and there's Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, and there's some other different groups. But we would, there was no active Jewish temple in Marin County when we were growing up, so we would drive into San Francisco. And there was a ritual, basically. We'd go in, we'd go to temple, I'd go to religious school, and my parents would do some other things. We'd get some special pastries on the way home and go back. When the synagogue opened in Marin County, I was active then in religious youth groups also.
And was it always a pleasing experience, or early on were you duty bound? How did that all unfold?
Well, as you might imagine, it's certainly common that we do what our parents tell us, we do what's interesting. If we don't like what we're doing, we usually resist it. By and large, I participated, not as much as I might have, because I had many other things I was doing in middle school and then high school. But it helped me develop the foundation, something that was real, something that was meaningful. It helped me maintain an interest in learning about my Jewish religion.
Were you harassed any growing up for being a Jew?
In my entire high school of about maybe 1,000 kids, there might have been 8 or 9 of us who were Jewish. And every once in a while I'd hear a comment that was a stereotypical insult that all people who are in religions hear from time to time.
Well said.
But it was really rare. And what's especially interesting about Northern California is that because of when people came out from to the gold rush in 1848 and 1849, people came from all over the world. And by and large, everybody was accepted because everybody either needed each other or they had no reason to hate each other because they were there for their own purposes. Jews have always been widely assimilated in Northern California, the Bay Area, and certainly here in Sacramento.
I haven't ever heard it quite said that way. That's a good deal. How about hobbies? What do you do when you just have free time to just do something Ron wants to do?
Well, I do a lot of reading. I mean, I keep up on politics. I'm an expert in healthcare, so I keep up on that. But one of the most interesting things I've done now for 23 years is be a soccer referee. Running up and down with the kids helps me keep young.
When you and I were chatting about that a week or two ago, I was impressed. That's pretty good stuff. Our kids and grandkids all play soccer, and you got to keep going for all you're worth. It's not quite like being the home plate umpire standing behind the plate most of the time. What do you see as a great need in Greater Sacramento right now in humanity and society that the faith, religions, and groups and individuals could help with?
Based on my experience with the Interfaith Council, as well as my own participation in our temple in Israel, I've been always amazed at how willing people are to take their time and their energy and their money to go after the major problems in our area: poverty, hunger, housing issues. Every once in a while, an individual organizes something really major, and it helps people who are needy. The problem is that it isn't solving a problem; it's sort of dealing with it day by day.
That's a good way to say that.
And I'm not positive there's an easy way to solve the problem, but in the meantime, we do what we can.
Do you think with the arena coming downtown, being the major personality in downtown Sacramento, that will speed resolution in some of the other areas? I'm thinking about homelessness and poverty and some of the things that unfold in the parks.
One of the basic different issues regarding homelessness and hunger, for that matter, is individuals behaving in ways that aren't in their own interest. And it's very difficult to make a person who has been homeless for 5 or 10 years change behavior. When the downtown arena is up, all the focus will be on basically commerce. That's a good thing. It's very important. Hopefully the people who participate in that environment will be donating additional resources to help the rest of Sacramento. And so far, based on what I've heard of the new owners, they're probably going to be doing that.
Are you a Kings fan?
Absolutely.
Way to go. The NBA's brought a lot of vitality to the city of Sacramento, hasn't it?
It'd be a lot better if they began winning, though.
There you go. And are you optimistic?
Yes, as everyone is at the beginning of the season. I was optimistic with the Kaldor, my football team. They're not doing well. Optimistic with the 49ers. They are doing reasonably well. And the Kings are next.
Well, we'll see how all of that unfolds. Now, as you have moved about the various faiths, do you see more similarities or differences amongst the people that you and I get to associate with?
What's been a rather amazing experience on the Interfaith Council, representing the Jewish community when I was there, the willingness of people to agree with each other and avoid disagreement was very, very exciting. People identified a topic. They all said, all right, how do we help? How do we do it? There was very little conflict over we're going to do it that way versus that way. People said, all right, someone gives us an idea, we're going to go help it out. That's a very impressive aspect of the Interfaith Council. It's also very impressive about the many individual religious organizations who will participate in these things. So it means that with the continued leadership of yourself with the Interfaith Council, we should be able to get a lot of things accomplished.
I hope so, and there's a lot of good things in the future. And the Jewish tradition is an important part in Sacramento and has been for a very long time.
Well, as I mentioned, during the gold rush, Jews came to Sacramento as well. And when they early on, many of them realized they were not going to make a lot of money in the gold fields, and their traditions and their own history encouraged them to go into being merchants. They had come from other places, so they organized many of the long-term um, uh, companies in Sacramento that provided benefits, supplies to the miners. In that regard, they became very important people in the entire community, and the Jewish community, as it got larger, grew. The temple I belonged to, B'nai Israel, was the first Jewish synagogue west of the Mississippi
Really?
in 1849,
I didn't know that.
and it has moved a couple of times. But in the meantime, other people have come here for government and for agricultural reasons. And as commerce has evolved, developed, Jews have been involved at all different levels.
Do you know how many synagogues there are in sort of greater Sacramento County?
There are probably about 6 or 7, and I'm hedging because there is one in Auburn, there is one there are 4 in Sacramento, there's one in Davis, there's one in Stockton, and there are other groups of Jews that get together without being in an organized fashion because it's in their interest to do that.
Now, there are rabbis also who live and work and bless us who don't necessarily have a pulpit. Is that correct?
There are some. When, based on my knowledge of this, which is certainly limited, but getting a degree in divinity from a Jewish theological seminary gives you many different opportunities, and some of them are a pulpit. Some of those are involved in social action. Others are involved with Hillel, which is an organization at the colleges. And others become writers and researchers. Most of the rabbis end up with a pulpit at one time in their lives.
Good. Now, let's talk about JCRC and the Jewish Federation in Sacramento. Could we please? Now, I know that you've been involved in both of those. Let's start with the JCRC. Will you tell us a little bit more about that?
The JCRC is a structure that basically exists all over the country, and they are based at the Jewish federations. The Jewish Federation is an effort to provide resources to the Jewish community wherever they exist. The JCRC, Jewish Community Relations Council, is sort of a public outreach, public relations arm, and how much they do or how little they do depends a great deal on leadership and the size of the Jewish community. By and large, the JCRC in Sacramento reaches out not only to non-Jews, providing information about the Jewish community and helping other non-Jews participate in community activities, but we also reach out to the Jews. Probably only about a third or less of Jews in any community are involved with any organized Jewish activity. So there's many people who are culturally Jewish, raised Jewish, who are not involved with anything specifically, and the JCRC, as well as the Federation, reaches out to them to make sure they have a Jewish home.
So is each federation sort of local? I mean, the Jewish Federation in Sacramento would just deal with just what's pretty local here, and there could be a Jewish Federation in San Francisco or Fresno or Los Angeles or something.
Yes, but they're often regional also. So, for example, the Jewish Federation of our area of Northern California goes from Stockton to Chico, and from Vacaville, of course, to Tahoe. So it covers a wide region.
That's a big group.
In San Francisco, they have a Jewish Federation that is primarily in San Francisco, although it operates regionally. I don't think there's one in many other of the major cities in the Bay Area, but there are a few.
Did you get as a child I'm a Mormon boy, and I got as a child, find you a nice Mormon girl and spend your life in Mormonism, which I've done, and I'm happy and pleased that I've done. But did you get that as a child? Find a nice, sweet Jewish girl and
My Jewish mother was always encouraging me to go out with Jewish girls so that I would marry one. And as often is the case, you tend to want to play around a little bit.
Sure.
You meet a lot of different people. You go out with different people. When I met my wife, who I basically met in the back of the state assembly chambers, she was a lobbyist. I was working in the Capitol at the time. My wife was raised Christian with a Jewish mother. And in our tradition, if your mother is Jewish, you're automatically Jewish, whether you know anything, know how to spell the word or not. So my wife, Rachel, although was basically Jewish, was raised Christian and decided on her own to go through what's called a B'nai Mitzvah educational seminary. When boys are 13 and girls now do it, they go through bar mitzvah for boys and bat mitzvah for girls. Now adults, and this has been going on for some years in the Jewish community, now go through a B'nai Mitzvah. They learn Hebrew, they learn the prayers, they give a speech, they do all that stuff. And it immerses them into the traditions and some of the liturgy of the Jewish religion. So Rachel, Jewish name, although it's a very popular name, did that. That would not have been, I didn't require that. I didn't ask her to do that. She just chose on her own. And we've raised our kids Jewish and been active in the Jewish community.
How long did you date before religion came up?
It's a good question because I frankly didn't know her religion or what her background was when we met. And so we were together for probably about almost 2 years before we got engaged and then got married. And I frankly don't remember when we even talked about that. I think as I learned about her parents, I realized that her mother's family were very active in the Jewish community in Los Angeles. And I figured, oh, well, that's good, I guess.
My wife had lived in the little town where we grew up, and everybody, of course, knew her. Then her father took a job and moved away to California for a couple of years, and while they were gone, my mother, who was a widow, had remarried, and we moved into that community in 7th grade. So when they came back a year or two later, everybody knew them but me. I didn't know who she was. But I found out that she went to the same little church that I went, the youth things and the weekday evenings, and that gave me an opportunity to try to sit close to her and get a little nearer to her and all of those other sorts of things. And we had talked some years ago. We just associated and dated, and I don't really mean we didn't go to the movies and things. But we just associated with each other until we were old enough to sort of get talking seriously about marriage, and that when we began to talk about having children and faith, and we had similar goals and beliefs, but up to that point in time it was just let's get to know each other and enjoy each other, and the fact you both went to the same church worked out pretty well.
Faith makes a difference, and certainly it's usually better if people are educated and brought up in the same faith, although there was a recent poll out indicating that a substantial majority of Jews are intermarrying. And the issue then is whether they're raising their kids Jewish or not, or in a Jewish life. And it's evolving rather rapidly in the Jewish community.
Now, I think I read not too long ago there are 15 million Jews worldwide. Am I close?
Yeah, you're close. The number I heard was 14, but we're not going to quibble in a little tiny religion like ours.
Well, are the majority of the Jewish people in the Western Hemisphere?
The breakdown is basically about 6.5 million in the U.S. and the rest, and almost about that many, maybe a little bit more in Israel, and the rest all over the world. So we're scattered as we always have been ever since the temple was destroyed about about 3,000 years ago.
Have you been to Jerusalem?
I have not been, and I miss that.
I haven't been either, and I hope to do that one day. Um, let's go back to soccer for a minute.
I'm ready.
Um, did you feel like you were an athletic kid when you were growing? Even as a child, you liked to run and jump and kick and play and
I
hit?
was a swimmer,
A swimmer.
and I wasn't any good on the football field. I tried out. I tried out in basketball. That wasn't for me. We didn't learn soccer growing up. It was very very rare that anybody did that. But I was a swimmer, so I understood the feeling of muscle development and achievement and those issues. But I got into soccer when our daughter was a player in 1990, and participated in her life as I participated in my boy David's life also. And I didn't want to just sit in a chair watching him play, so I went to a referee school, and they have that, and you learn how to do those things.
Was it all new to you? I mean, it was sort of like, wow, I don't understand this, and
Absolutely, and to this day, I'm not as good a referee as the people who were players.
well, that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you still swim?
I do occasionally. I haven't done it a lot recently. Most of the exercises now, training for refereeing in the off years, and then when you're reffing, like I did this last weekend, you're exhausted. Certainly at my age, I need a nap after.
Have you ever gotten hurt refereeing?
Oh, I pulled some muscles and hurt my feet because I didn't have the right kind of shoes. But other than occasionally getting a ball kicked in my chest or head, hasn't been bad.
It's been okay. And do you think, do those playing soccer respect and pay attention to the referees, or is it just sort of a necessary evil that they have to be there?
Well, it sort of depends on the age group and the training and the coaches. The coaches are very important in making sure the players understand that they have to listen to the referee. But the referee has a large responsibility to treat everybody fairly, the teams fairly, and the kids. The kids need to know not only is this person there to, carry out the rules, but also to make sure they have a safe and a fair game. And the younger ones don't quite get it, but when you get into the under 14 levels, they begin to understand that it's both important and the referees are necessary, sometimes in the way, but they got to pay attention.
Do you see in your work and in soccer and other things outside of the temple or the synagogue that people are religious?
I don't notice that much. Every once in a while with a client, and I have clients. I often represent physicians, and they are from 20 different countries from all over the world. They're here in Sacramento, and occasionally when I run into people who are religious, I sometimes hear that, and in the right context at the right time, I'll let them know that I'm a Jew and I'm religious, and I understand that thought process. My most interesting clients have been Muslim. And I have a great interest in making sure the Muslim community and the Jewish community, and for that matter, everybody else, gets along with everyone, because of what's happening elsewhere in the world. And occasionally we talk. Sometimes it's a little awkward because I'm there telling them some things they don't want to hear about what's happening to them, and that's not the time to talk about religious feelings. But it comes up occasionally.
Do you think doesn't matter if God's in your life, no matter what religion you are or what your avocation in life might be?
Well, it's a very important question because it raises the issue of right and wrong and morality. Where does it all come from? And those people who believe they can get this analysis of morality out of a book have a very limited view of the world. They have to decide where it all comes from. We Jews, who have often been called the chosen people because God allegedly told us to bring the fact of one God to the rest of the world. We constantly say that we wish that God had chosen someone else because it hasn't been hard. It's been kind of hard on us over the millennium. But by and large, we need to know what is expected of us in life. And the way you find that out is you listen to your religious leaders and you study where these sages and philosophers and prophets have interpreted what is right and what is wrong. And if you learn those things and you follow them, you have a better life and you treat other people better.
Is there such a thing as having a favorite rabbi? I mean, through the course of your year, there's one that was just extra super duper.
It is, and it often happens when you're early on in your life at a synagogue or a church, obviously. The rabbi that you had the deepest discussions with become the favorite rabbi. The other rabbis participated in your life, and over the years, they have a great knowledge of the family, great knowledge of experiences, and they become a favorite because they're the ones who are affecting your life at the time.
It's fun to love a religious leader, I think. You look at them and say, when I was a boy or when I was a teenager, I met with he or she and they did this. Well, let me ask you one last question. If you can wave a magic wand in the world and fix or replace or repair or do away with or whatever, something that would help in our society from your point of view, what would that be?
It would be that everybody has a personal philosophy. And whether that ends up being a particular religious tradition or a particular belief, that would be good. But they all have a particular philosophy that guides them as to how they behave toward other people.
Well said. Thanks, Ron. It's a pleasure for me to have you here. I hope we'll both go on with soccer even a while longer. I'm very impressed you're doing that. That's a good example for those of us of our generation. Way to go.
Well, I expect to go for another couple years, and then they'll give me the golden soccer ball. That's a joke.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll have to help out there. Thanks again for being here.
And thank you for inviting me.
Take care.